Welcome everyone to Meditation Mount. It's wonderful to have you join with us on a very, very warm day here in Southern California. The outside temperature today was about 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 42 plus Celsius. So we're under a heat dome. But inside of that, we can find a place to stand in the cool waters of the soul, hopefully. So let us begin as we normally do by welcoming everyone from around the world, bringing ourselves present by creating a unified field of awareness, a field of group consciousness. And we do this simply by bringing our awareness inside of our heart, becoming aware of our breathing, letting go of any tensions that may be held within our physical body, inside our emotional body, inside the mind. We simply let go and stand in the stillness and silence of the heart together. Knowing that we are connected through lines of lighted love that weave together our many hearts. And this unified field will be the garden in which the light of our soul will further grow and glow today. So thank you. I'd like us to begin by actually pronouncing an affirmation of the soul. It's a way of just declaring the space that we seek to enter and stand in together. So let us read the words that come on the screen, and wherever you are in the world, simply say them together. More radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, subtler than the ether, is the self, the spirit within me. I am that self. That self am I. We are that self. That self are we. I wanted to begin with that particular affirmation because it was one of Dr. Roberto Assagioli's favorite ways of beginning a group meeting. And as many of you know, that Dr. Assagioli was the inspiration behind Meditation Mount, and he was also the founder of the spiritual psychology that we know as psychosynthesis. So when we sound an affirmation of the soul, like the one we just sounded, it brings us present to the truth of who we are, the innate truth. And it reaffirms what we call here at Meditation Mount the principle of essential divinity. That's the principle that declares that a unique spark of the Creator lives inside each one of us and inside all of creation. I'd like to extend an invitation to all of us this evening, because this view from the Mount broadcast has the theme, the flowering of the soul. And I would like us to create a wise and fertile space together in which we can connect with the overlighting soul and further stimulate the process of its flowering in the fields of time and space that we inhabit as incarnated souls. So rather than talk about meditating on the soul, today we are going to be standing as the soul, standing with the soul, and stimulating the further revelation of the soul in time and space. So there'll be a few more pauses, it'll be more reflective. We'll still be offering some stimulation as far as insights and esoteric wisdom and some of the teachings. However, the intent behind it is to create a field where we can deepen our ability to give birth to the light and love that is the soul of who we are. So the evolution of soul consciousness has been likened to the sequential opening of the many petals of a radiant flower. It's a fairly common image that's been used. And in Eastern philosophy, the lotus is used, while in the West, in our spiritual lineage here, it's mainly the rose that has depicted the promise and potential of this essential nature, this essential divinity. And we were going to be looking at both of these flowers, the rose and the lotus, during this broadcast, during our time of reflection together. So today's theme of the flowering of the soul really is a continuation of last month's view from the Mount, because the theme then was the call of the soul. It's one thing to listen and be called by the soul, it's another to respond and be able to unfold it. So the intent today with the flowering of the soul is to deepen our understanding of what it actually takes for the soul to successfully flower in this present challenging condition that we find ourselves in on Earth or inside the Earth garden. So I'd like to begin with some very simplistic images. These are basic concepts and examples drawn from nature. There are 3 images that I want to present just to align ourselves and orient ourselves to a set of imagery that we will be utilizing together. So this is called the seed of identity, an eternal promise. If you think of the seed as containing the promise, the potential, the purpose, it's eternal because it always is present. But it will only show up when it's planted in the ground. I mean, that's the secret. It's the obvious secret. You can't run around waving a seed saying, look at my fully blossomed flower. You actually have to go about the process of burying it in the ground and stimulating its growth and having it emerge and flower, etc. So what we'll be doing today is looking at the different stages of how does the seed get planted and how does it go through this developmental process, cycle by cycle, inside the earth. I'd like to offer one other thing inside of this particular seed of identity image. Those of you who are familiar with David Bohm, the scientist, he talked about the enfolded universe. It's like the universe that we're part of now, this created universe, began as an enfolded reality. It was a particle of the infinite. Inside was packed the pattern, the promise of the whole of creation. So he called that the enfolded universe. And really the secret is simply to unfold the unfolded. And that's basically what we're doing as a soul. The soul already is. It already exists. However, it needs to be sown in the fields of time and space, and its enfolded reality unfolded, so it can reveal its true splendor. So that's the seed of identity and the whole notion of cycles. So let's move to the next image, which gives us a different view of that same reality. David Bohm and other scientists, particularly those working with quantum physics, helped us understand the reality of the holographic world. And many years ago, I was very excited when I found out that if you had a holographic image on a plate of glass, if you actually smashed the glass and it broke into hundreds of pieces, you could look through any one of the pieces and see the whole. And I thought, well, what a wonderful reminder of that even in my fragmented state, the promise of my wholeness lives inside of it. So inside the cosmic seed is the eternal pattern that can't be taken away. It's always present. However, when we are on earth, when we are incarnated in time and space, we have to consciously go through the process of soul gardening, of growing who we are, growing the truth of who we are on the inside, allowing it to flower on the outside. So this is simply a way to show that even when we are forgetful, even when our seed is buried in the darkness of matter or the darkness of forgetfulness and ignorance, we haven't lost our identity. We're just not in relationship with it this time. So let me offer a third and final image for this series, because it has to do with what does it feel like sometimes when we are on earth, when we are looking at ourselves, not from the soul's perspective, but from a worm's eye perspective, from an earthly perspective. I call this the divine credibility gap, because often I look at myself, I look at my neighbors, and I see somebody else who I believe has blossomed much brighter and more colorful than I have. And I see myself as maybe just got a few leaves, and I have this sense of self-worth, or, oh my gosh, what a long journey. I wish I could be like my neighbor. And we have this way of comparing ourselves with others. And we can either be inspired by somebody who is blossoming, or we can be intimidated, and everything in between. What I'd like to remind ourselves about is that the fullness of who we are lives inside us. And over time, that fullness is revealed, even though we may be experiencing the partiality of that fullness. So it's reassuring to know that over time, the eternal will be revealed. So we'll revisit this theme when we get into the actual techniques of spiritual horticulture later on. So let's leave these initial images. So I talked earlier about these two flowers that are used, the lotus and the rose. I'd like to begin with the rose. As was mentioned, the rose is a symbol of the soul in the Western spiritual tradition. And those of you familiar with the Rosicrucian teaching know that the greeting from one member of that order to another is, "May the rose bloom on your cross." That simply means, may the soul be revealed and blossom, may be resurrected out of the cross of matter, because the light of the soul has been crucified, has been placed in the darkness of the earth. And the fulfilling of the promise of the earth is to reveal the light that is the love of the soul. And so when a Rosicrucian member meets another and says, "May the rose bloom on your cross," it's a way of acknowledging that essential divinity that lives inside us, acknowledging the soul of another person, and also acknowledging that we're in a process of revealing that. Dr. Roberto Assagioli, we're going to draw quite a bit upon his wisdom and his practice, this broadcast. He actually crafted and put together a meditation outline that had us visualize the rose. And I'd like us to do that together, because what I don't want to do is talk about how we at a later time can get the soul to flower. I want us to be present together in the now, as a time when the soul is flowering right here and now. Wherever we are in the world, we stand together in the Garden of Gaia, and our souls are unfolding petal by petal. So I'm going to lead you through this particular meditation. It'll take probably about 4 or 5 minutes at the most. It's not a long one, but it's going to call upon your faculty of visualization and imagination. So if it is helpful, you may wish to close your eyes or half close them. You're welcome to keep them open, but it's sometimes useful to close the eyes and to focus on that inner screen. So let us imagine that we're looking at a rose. And we visualize its stem and leaves with an unopened bud. And this bud appears green because its sepals are closed. So visualize this, a green bud, closed sepals. And then at the very top of the bud, you see a rose-colored point. So hold this visualization vividly. Hold this image in the center of your consciousness. And now begin a slow movement. And you see the sepals start to separate little by little, turning their points outward, revealing the rose-hued petals which are still closed. And holding this rosebud in our mind's eye, we see the sepals continue to open. And now we can see the whole bud, which has a delicate rose color. And as we watch, the petals too begin to slowly separate, until, one petal at a time, a perfect, fully open rose is seen. A fully open rose lives inside our consciousness. And as you view this imaginary rose, begin to smell its perfume, inhaling its characteristic, well-known scent. A scent so delicate, so sweet, so pleasant. And we smell it with great delight. And then let us move into the image of the rose, identifying ourselves with the rose itself. Let us introject it into ourselves. Symbolically, we are a flower. We are a rose. The same life that animates the universe and has created the miracle of the rose is producing in us a similar, ever greater miracle, which is the awakening and development of our spiritual being and that which radiates from it. So with this image of the rose alive inside you, and you alive inside it, identified with and as the rose, it becomes a symbol of your inner growth, your inner awakening, the awakening of those inner qualities of the soul, the awakening of self-realization and the radiation of your inner being. Each of us is like a rose with the same hidden potentialities as the bud. So let us close out this visualization by holding a seed thought and a seed image. In solitude, the rose of the soul flourishes. In solitude, the divine self can speak. In solitude, the faculties and graces of the higher self can root and blossom in the personality. So just bring yourself slowly back into a waking consciousness, which of course has changed because we now have a deeper realization of the power and the beauty that lives inside us as the soul seeks to express itself through our daily lives. So what I'd like to do is to go through that outline with you again, but this time not seeing it from the perspective of the individual, but reading through the different stages and visualizing the unfolding of the soul of our one humanity, because that really is the task in front of us. It's the urgent call of our times. It's for the light of the one soul to reveal itself and dispel the darkness. So what we'll do now is the particular meditation outline that we've been through has been put into 3 sets of images. And we'll simply go through this and we'll visualize the one soul of humanity unfolding. So let's begin with the first. And this time we're going to imagine it as the group soul. And this group soul is the one soul. And we are the many facets of this one soul. So let's start again. And hold this time, not just in our own consciousness, but within the group field that we've created together. So let us together imagine looking at a rose. We visualize its stem and leaves with an unopened bud. And the bud appears green because its sepals are closed. This is the bud that represents the soul of our one humanity. And at the very top of this bud, a rose-colored point can be seen. So let's visualize this image vividly, seeing the soul of the one humanity with this rose-colored point. And now we visualize a slow movement as the sepals start to separate little by little, and they turn their points outwards and they reveal the rose-hued petals which are still closed. And then holding this image of the rose that represents the one soul of humanity, the sepals continue to open. And now we can see the whole bud, which has a delicate rose color, the color of love. As we watch the petals, they too begin to slowly separate until a perfectly, fully open rose is seen. This is the destiny of the one soul of humanity, to reveal itself. And as you look at this imaginary rose, which is the one soul, begin to smell its perfume, inhaling its characteristic and well-known scent. And scent is the highest gift of the flower. It's the most refined frequency of expression of its quality. So be aware of the perfume that exudes from the soul of our one humanity. It's so delicate, so sweet, so pleasant. Let's smell and witness it with delight. And now let's identify ourselves with the rose as the totality of our humanity, as the soul of humanity, and let us introject it into this collective field. Symbolically, we as a human species are a flower, a rose. The same life that animates the universe and has created the miracle of the rose is producing in all of us and in the one soul a similar, ever greater miracle, which is the awakening and development of our spiritual being and that which radiates from it. So let us move to the last part of the meditation. And what we're doing is we're stimulating the one soul of humanity by our focused thought. Remember, energy follows thought. So consider the rose as a symbol of the inner growth of the one soul, the inner awakening of the inner qualities of the one soul of humanity, the self-realization of our oneness, and the radiation of our one being. Together, we are like a rose, with the same hidden potentialities as the bud. And so as we repeat the seed thought and seed image, let's do it with the whole of our humanity in mind, with the overlighting soul of humanity as the rose. In solitude, the rose of the soul flourishes. In solitude, the divine self can speak. In solitude, the faculties and graces of the higher self can root and blossom in the personality. Thank you. So we know the power of visualization because we are creating an image that we project into reality. And as energy follows thought, we are creating something that will precipitate into matter. Here at Meditation Mount, we're about an hour and a half drive from Hollywood. And many of the Hollywood movies that come out have these computer-generated images. And so what you believe to be true is not. It's somebody's imagination made real through computer-generated images. When we use the focused thought of our group field coupled with the compassion of the heart, we're doing a similar thing. But instead of computer-generated images, we're creating what I call MGM, which isn't Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. It's mind-generated movies. So the power of visualization is that we can create mind-generated movies that then play out on the screen of life. We are not only the creators of the movies, we're the projectors, we're the actors, we're the whole ensemble. So I just wanted to put that out there because it isn't, oh, let's just visualize something and then, no, that was just fanciful, wishful thinking. No, it's real. To the degree that we can follow through on our thought and clothe our ideas in mental and emotional and physical matter, it becomes a reality. So we've just explored the rose. It's a very powerful symbol. I'd like to take some time now to explore the lotus, that is the symbol of life used mainly in the Eastern philosophical traditions, because the lotus represents the soul. I'm not going to show an image of a lotus on the screen. I want you to imagine in your mind's eye, in your heart, a lake surrounded by high mountains, and on the surface of the lake is a field of lotus. So let's explore why the lotus is used to denote the soul and its earthly unfoldment and its eventual flowering. First of all, where are the roots? They're in the mud at the bottom of the lake. So they're in the earth. And mud is simply earth and water mixed. So this represents the material plane. We're rooted in the earth as incarnated beings. And then the stem that grows up through the water, which represents the emotional or feeling body, and the lower mental plane, the instinctive mind. So we grow our ability through experiences of emotions and mind. And then there comes a point where the lotus breaks through the surface, rises above the water, and forms a bud in the air. And the air represents what's called the Buddhic plane, or the intuitive plane. So you've begun in the mud, you've grown up through the water, you then have emerged into the air. And then the bud begins to respond to the call of a higher fire, which is the solar fire, which is the sun. And petal by petal, the bud opens to the heavens in response to the call of this solar force. And this solar force represents the higher fire of spirit. And once all the petals are opened, so we're told in the Eastern tradition, a jewel is revealed. We've heard about the jewel within the lotus. So when all the petals have opened up, a jewel is revealed that has been hidden in the heart of the lotus all this time. And then something magical happens. When the fire of the sun that lives in the heart of the sun, the fire of spirit, touches the jewel, there is this flash. There is this holy communion between heaven and earth. And the lotus then, in that moment, represents this bridge between these two worlds. And the fire enters the lotus by entering the jewel. And then we have, if you like, the resplendent flowering of the lotus. So that's a way that the story is told of the unfolding and the flowering of the soul in the Eastern tradition. So I like to use both the rose and the lotus so that we can draw on both traditions. So here at Meditation Mount, we've taken these natural images of the rose and the lotus and all the analogies that you can use from Mother Nature, and also from this process of unfolding the enfolded. Remember, I said David Bohm's enfolded universe is everything packed into a particle of infinity, and then you pop it into the waters of time and space, and it unfolds. So enfolding the universe, that's how it starts out. The enfolded universe needs to be unfolded. So what we've done recently at Meditation Mount, we got together as a group of people, and we created a 6-week course called Soul Gardening. And what I'd like to do is share with you a 3-minute video that introduces it, because I want to dive deeper into the subject matter, because it carries on our exploration of what it takes to successfully flower on Earth. So let's just watch this. Welcome to Meditation Mount and to this introduction to soul gardening. My name is Michael Linfield and I'll be your gardening guide in the coming weeks and months. So when you think of gardening, what comes to mind? What do you need? Well, you need seeds, you need good soil, you need gardening tools, you need an understanding of the cycles and seasons, and you also need some degree of relationship with nature. So, what's the difference between traditional gardening and soul gardening? For one thing, we don't have to go to the store to buy some seeds. Each of us carries within a secret place in the heart where the promise of who we are is safeguarded over time. So we have the seeds already. And as far as the soil, we don't have to import any soil, because the soil in which our seeds are to be planted are created by how we think and feel each day. We create our own psychological soil conditions. And as far as understanding the cycles and the seasons, it's listening to the rhythm of the soul, how it seeks to dance and express in life. And we'll learn how to do that in a more refined way. So why are we doing this? Why do we need to grow who we are in Earth's garden? It's very simple. Each one of us carries a special gift that nobody else carries. That gift is needed. And it is needed this time more than ever. So the gift of who you are needs to be sown and grown and shown. And when we all do this, we get this incredible garden of Gaia. We have all the diverse expressions of the one life in a spectrum of radiant color, perfume. So we're doing this to plant the new garden of Gaia. And each of us is not only the gardener, but we are the flowers that are growing in that garden. And it's up to us to be the soul gardeners of our own life. So we invite you to enter into this journey. It's not a journey to a distant destination. It's a journey inside to bring out and reveal that which lives on the inside so that it can shine on the outside as a gift to our world. Thank you. So that really encapsulates all the elements for successfully gardening, for being a soul gardener. And I just want to name them. We heard briefly the different names. First of all, there's the seed of identity, who we are, which is the promise, which is the future contained in the seed. And that seed lives in our heart. And it's up to us to dare to plant it in time and space, dare to plant it in daily life. So who we are is a reality. It goes back to the principle of essential divinity. Essential divinity says, I am a fractal of the one life. Inside of me, inside of you, inside of all creation, that spark of the one creative life burns brightly. So you can have lots of seeds, but nothing's going to happen with the seed until you plant it. We go back to the first image that we saw earlier. This promise, this eternal promise, is going to remain a promise until it's actually planted. It has to be shown by being sown and grown. So what do we do next? Well, we have to create what we call the right psychological or psychic soil conditions. And we know as gardeners, if I take a seed and put it on rocky ground, very little is going to happen. There's not the right soil conditions to allow for germination to take place. And likewise, if I place the seed of my identity on the hard ground of hatred or separation or the arid ground of despair, it's going to be denied the nutrients it needs. So part of our role as soul gardeners is to create the right psychological conditions, starting with ourselves, working with each other. And one of the things that we cover in this course, and also one of the things that we work with all the time here at Meditation Mount, is being present by liberating ourselves from the prison of the past. So we don't run away from the past, but whatever pain is a painful reminder of something that happened before, we learn to compost it. I spent many years working as an organic farmer, first of all in the northwest of Sweden, and then at the Findhorn community in northeastern Scotland. I was privileged to take care of the original vegetable garden for several years. And this is where we did the experiment between humans, the angelic presences we call the devas, and the elemental forces. It was a way of understanding what it means to be part of this multi-dimensional ecosystem and to give birth to the flower that is the soul. So composting the pain and the patterns of the past, I don't want to go into too much depth because then we go into the course. But what you could say is, as a gardener working with compost, I knew when my compost was ready by its smell. In the early days, when you start putting all the stuff on the compost, it starts to heat up and it smells bad and it gets very sticky and it's sour. And then over time, once you've aerated it, once you've turned it over, and once you've left it to go through its alchemical process, you notice something has shifted from sour to sweet. You know when the compost is ready, when you can put your hand in the compost bin, it feels soft and loose and it smells sweet. Well, the same is true of the past, the pain of the past. If I've had an incident in the past that causes me pain now, and it still is like a thorn in my side, I know when I have successfully composted that, when I think about that and it no longer grabs me, it no longer is sour and sticky, but what I experience is sweetness. This is not necessarily a sweet smell, but it's a sweetness of gratitude for the lessons I've learned and gratitude for the gift of life. So what does it mean to be a soul gardener? What does it mean to work together with each other to give birth to the soul of humanity, to allow it to flower? One of the things we have to do is to understand the different phases, the developmental phases of the soul. We have to understand what you could call the spiritual horticulture. When to do something, when not to do something. And the other thing you need to know is the rhythms and cycles. You need to know what happens in the winter time, what happens in the spring, what happens in the summer, what happens in the fall, because these are very different opportunities for the continuous unfoldment of the flower that is the soul. And without going into too much detail, a quick recap would be, in the winter, the promise of the seed is held at a deep inner level. So winter is when the seed is, if you like, planted in the spiritual soil, in the darkness of matter. And this is the darkness of the womb, not the darkness of the tomb. And then in the spring, there's a thrill that begins to awaken the seed. It quickens, it germinates, it puts down roots, it puts up shoots, and it comes up above the earth. And then in the summer, it builds its flowers and its fruits, and it begins to give of itself. And then when we reach the fall, the autumn, we harvest its gifts. And then we take the blessings that have happened in the spring and the summer and now being harvested, and we prepare the seeds for the next season of growth. And the difference between the seed that we planted at the beginning of the year and the seed that we'll be planting at the beginning of the next year, it's one cycle wiser, one cycle more able to express itself. So I just wanted to name these different elements and phases that are part of learning what it means to be a soul gardener. I do believe that the urgency of the times is such that each of us is being asked to shine the light of our soul each day as much as we can because of the current darkness that is prevailing. And you could say that for each flower that opens and radiates its blessings, then a much needed shower of soul light is released into the psychic atmosphere. And when this enters the atmosphere, it changes it. And it aids in the dispelling of those dark clouds that are presently casting what I would call ominous shadows, and those dark clouds that are currently obscuring the light of the one soul. Remember, the sun is always present in the sky, shining. Sometimes the clouds obscure it. The soul is ever present and shining. It's just occasionally and temporarily it's obscured by these dark clouds, whether they be hatred, separation, forgetfulness, whatever it is. So I'd like to bring our time together to a close and to read some lines by Rumi, or to give him his full name, Jalal al-Din Rumi. And this is a very powerful affirmation. Though we seem to be sleeping, there is an inner wakefulness that directs the dream, and that will eventually startle us back to the truth of who we are. So Rumi is basically saying, essential divinity, inescapable. It will build up, it will wake up, and it will make itself known, and it will startle us back, shake us, and have us let go of all the not self and stand in the light and the radiance of the self itself. So if we were to sum this up, we could say that the current darkness that is caused by ignorance or separation, hatred, that is currently reigning on earth, can really only be dispelled by the clear and loving light of the awakened soul. So the call to answer the soul, the call to have it flower in the earth garden, isn't just some wonderful dream and wishful thinking and something that will make our lives better. It is a necessity, because the future of the world, I believe, depends on our collective ability to respond to the compelling call of the one soul, and for us together to harness its innate, what I would call heart-lighted power as a constructive force for good. I mean, the times are such that without the light of the soul, the darkness of ignorance and separation will continue. For me, it's that simple. So let's very gently enter the silence again and breathe in all the things that we've been given, all the things that have revealed themselves to us in the silence of the heart, in our visualizations, through our time together in this broadcast. And we affirm that we are souls on earth. So let us declare, may the soul flower on earth. may its light and love bring the needed gifts to our world. So thank you, everyone, for your presence and your participation today. The broadcast may be ending, but the process of unfolding the unfolded, of soul gardening, continues day by day by day, until the full glory of what lives on the inside is fully revealed on the outside. So thank you. Good night, and many blessings from all of us here at Meditation Mount.